The late afternoon sun hung low over the quiet Seattle neighborhood, casting long, melting shadows across the pavement like ribbons of fatting gold. It was the hour when joggers returned home, grocery bags rustled on porches, and distant boats hummed from the Puget Sound. The kind of warm, ordinary day where nothing dramatic seemed likely to happen. But on that sidewalk, under the soft glow of the setting sun, something entirely out of place was unfolding, something that most people didn't notice, and even fewer cared to interrupt. A German shepherd, large, strong, and dignified despite his slumped posture, staggered forward on trembling legs. His claws scraped the concrete in short, frantic bursts. His chest heaved in uneven, broken breaths. His saliva dripped onto the pavement in thick strands. His tongue, once a healthy pink, now carried a hint of bluish gray. The dog was choking. He tried to bark, but nothing came out except a weak, choking cough that sounded more like a dry rattle. His eyes watered as his lungs fought for air, and every failed attempt at breathing made his ribs contract violently. His whole body trembled with a kind of fear that even humans rarely feel, pure, primal panic. People noticed him. They really did. They weren't blind or oblivious. They simply didn't want to get involved. A man in a gray business suit slowed, eyebrows rising in curiosity, but after a few seconds of watching the dog struggle, he muttered, "Someone else will deal with it," and continued down the street. A pair of teenagers with backpacks and earbuds crossed the street deliberately, throwing quick glances over their shoulders. "Looks like it's sick," one whispered. "Don't go near it," the other warned, pulling him away. An elderly woman walking with a cane saw the shepherd collapse to his knees, body convulsing as he fought to clear his airway. She paused, looked around for help, then shook her head as if defeated by the world's indifference. She whispered a soft prayer under her breath, but walked away anyway. The dog dragged himself forward with desperate resolve. His legs buckled beneath him. He gasped again, nothing. The object lodged in his throat made every movement excruciating. His body slumped sideways, trembling. 30 feet away, a delivery cyclist swerved around him, muttering, "Can't deal with this right now," before speeding off. A group of tourists pointed, shrugged, and kept walking, more focused on their phone cameras than the living being dying in front of them. No one stepped in. No one tried. The German shepherd's breaths became slower, shallower. Each one labored like someone lifting a weight far too heavy. His heartbeat drummed wildly beneath his fur, then weakened, stumbling in rhythm like a failing engine. His vision blurred. The world around him darkened at the edges. He collapsed fully now, his body stretched across the sidewalk, chest working in painful spasms. His ears pinned back. His tail twitched once, then stilled. The object choking him, a small rubber ball, sat lodged deep in his throat, invisible to the casual observer but unmistakably fatal. His lungs burned, his throat screamed, his body shook. And still people walked past. A skateboarder whizzed by so close he nearly clipped the shepherd's paw. He glanced down, annoyance flashing across his face. Someone's pet got loose," he muttered, not realizing, nor caring, that the dog had minutes left if no one intervened. The shepherd tried once more to push himself upright, but his body refused. The oxygen deprivation made his muscles slacken. His chest convulsed. His eyes closed halfway. The world dimmed further. Voices blurred in the distance. Footsteps echoed like muffled drums. Cars honked somewhere far away. The buzzing in his ears deepened. His eyelids drooped. His body began shutting down. And still no one stopped. The shepherd let out a faint whine, soft, barely audible, more breath than sound. His legs curled inward slightly in instinctive fear. His head dropped to the concrete. His breathing slowed to a shallow rasp. His consciousness flickered like a dying candle. He was alone. Utterly alone. The sun continued sinking across the horizon. painting the street in gentle amber light that felt achingly at odds with the tragedy unfolding beneath it. The air smelled faintly of pine and warm asphalt. A breeze rattled a street sign overhead. Life moved on around him. But then something changed. A soft squeal broke through the background noise, not from the shepherd, not from any adult. From a baby. A stroller rolled into view from the far end of the sidewalk, pushed by a young mother who looked distracted, her mind somewhere else entirely. She held a grocery bag in one hand and maneuvered the stroller awkwardly with the other, her messy hair tied into a loose bun, exhausted but determined as only a new parent could be. Inside the stroller sat a 1-year-old boy, Liam, with big hazel eyes that scanned the world with wild curiosity. He wore a small blue jacket, his fingers curled around the edge of the stroller tray, tiny legs kicking gently with every bump in the pavement. Liam was babbling softly, lost in his own baby thoughts, until his eyes locked onto the German shepherd lying collapsed across the sidewalk. He froze. His babbling stopped instantly. His eyes widened with raw, instinctive concern. Then he pointed hard. A sharp, urgent sound burst from his tiny throat, something between a gasp and a cry, drawing his mother's attention. Emily paused. "What is it, sweetheart?" she asked, adjusting her grip on the stroller handle. Liam pointed again, this time more frantically, almost leaning out of the stroller as he whined insistently. His whole body leaned toward the struggling shepherd, his face contorting with distress. "Liam, what?" Emily followed the direction of his tiny finger. And then she saw the dog. Her breath caught. She froze in place, stunned not just by the sight of the shepherd dying on the sidewalk, but by the realization, sharp and painful, that dozens of people had passed him by without lifting a finger. The shepherd's chest rose weakly once, then shuddered as if giving up. Emily's heart slammed against her ribs. "God, oh my God!" She rushed forward, dropping the grocery bag without a second thought. It hit the pavement and rolled away, apples scattering across the street. Liam let out a frightened cry as the stroller jolted, but Emily didn't stop. She reached the shepherd's side, her knees hitting the ground with an audible thud. The dog's eyes fluttered. His breaths were faint. His body trembled. Emily's voice came out in a whisper, shaky and terrified. "Stay with me, please stay with me." But as she leaned closer, the German shepherd's body suddenly went frighteningly still. Completely still. His chest stopped moving. His eyes froze half open. Liam let out a sharp, trembling wail from the stroller. And Emily realized, with a cold shock shooting through her spine, he might already be gone. For 3 long seconds, Emily could only stare at the German shepherd's motionless body, her breath trapped somewhere between her chest and throat. The world around her faded into a strange, surreal blur, the passing cars, the voices of pedestrians, even the distant cry of a seagull circling overhead. Everything washed out until all she could hear was the faint, shaky breathing of her own child and the eerie silence of the dog lying before her. "Sweetheart, it's okay," she whispered without believing the words, forcing herself to turn and check on Liam. He was in his stroller, face reddening, tears pooling in his wide hazel eyes as he stared at the shepherd with a kind of fear Emily had never seen in him before. It wasn't the startled cry of a baby reacting to loud noise or sudden motion. It was something deeper, troubled, almost knowing. Emily reached out to calm him, but the moment her hand left the ground, Liam shook his head violently. He didn't want comfort. He wanted something else. His tiny hand stretched out toward the dog, trembling. She blinked, startled. "You want me to help him?" Liam whimpered, nodding, actually nodding, his baby curls bouncing with emotion. A 1-year-old couldn't understand death, couldn't understand what choking meant, couldn't understand the fragility of a life slipping away. And yet, somehow, he did. His little fingers tapped urgently against the stroller tray, his whole body leaning toward the shepherd as if begging his mother to do something. Emily's heart twisted. How could a baby understand what dozens of adults had ignored? She turned back to the dog, her hands shaking as she reached for him again. The shepherd's fur was warm, but his body felt unnervingly limp. His chest didn't rise. His heartbeat, if there was one, was faint enough to make her breath snag in anxiety. "Please don't be gone," she whispered, brushing away strands of fur from his face. "Not like this, not in the middle of the street, not alone." If only she had gotten there sooner. If only someone, anyone, had stopped. Her mind raced. She needed to check his airway. She needed to see if she could do anything, even if it felt impossible. She had taken a canine first aid workshop years ago, back when she volunteered briefly at an animal shelter. Most of the steps she remembered only vaguely, like half-faded instructions drifting in from another lifetime. But she had to try. First, she tilted the dog's head gently, trying to open his airway. Nothing changed. Next, she pressed an ear to his chest, searching desperately for the faintest sign of a heartbeat. There's something, weak, barely there but not gone. He's still alive, she breathed out, relief crashing into her like a wave. But the relief didn't last. Because the next moment she saw it, the rubber ball barely visible at the back of the dog's throat, wedged deep, and too round, too smooth, too jammed. Her stomach tightened. No wonder he couldn't breathe. "Okay," she murmured, more to herself than anyone else. "Okay, Emily, think. What did the instructor say?" Behind her, Liam whimpered again, kicking his feet anxiously against the stroller tray. "It's okay, baby," she said, though she didn't look away from the shepherd. "Mommy's going to help." She wasn't sure if she was reassuring Liam or herself. She tried to angle the dog onto his side, but the shepherd was heavy, way heavier than she expected. His limp body made it even harder, and she struggled, hands slipping through his thick fur. A couple walking past slowed down, watching her. "Is that dog dead?" the man muttered. "I think so," the woman whispered back. "Come on, let's not get involved." Emily snapped, voice sharp with fear and frustration. "He's not dead. Please, can one of you help me? Just help me lift him." They hesitated, looked at each other, looked at the dog. Then walked away. Emily's jaw clenched, her pulse roared in her ears. Fine. If no one would help, she'd figure it out herself. She braced one knee on the pavement, hooked her arm under the shepherd's torso, and used her entire body weight to shift him onto his side. It took every ounce of strength she had, and the moment she succeeded, she felt the dog's chest rise slightly. But still, no real breath followed. "Come on," she whispered, "stay with me." The object in his throat looked too far back to reach safely. She could try the Heimlich maneuver for dogs, but it was risky. She could injure him if she did it wrong, but doing nothing guaranteed death. Behind her, Liam let out a distressed cry, his little hands gripping the edge of the stroller so hard his knuckles went white. Emily swallowed hard. "Okay," she whispered, positioning herself behind the dog. Okay, I'll try." She wrapped her arms loosely around the dog's abdomen, trying to remember the placement. Just below the rib cage, just upward pressure. Short, forceful. Don't squeeze the ribs, don't crush anything. "Please work," she said shakily under her breath. She pulled in a sharp upward thrust. Nothing happened. She tried again. Still nothing. The shepherd's body jolted slightly, but the ball didn't budge. Her heart pounded so violently she felt dizzy. "Please," she whispered, tears stinging her eyes. "Please don't die, not while my baby is watching." She pulled a third time, harder. A thin, raspy wheeze escaped the dog's throat, but not enough. Not air, not life, just the sound of something shifting dangerously inside. Emily gasped. No, don't slip deeper." She adjusted her grip and thrust again. This time the shepherd let out a faint, choking cough, barely louder than a whisper. "Come on," she urged, desperation cracking her voice. But then, the dog went completely still again. His chest stopped moving. His throat sagged. His body softened in her arms in a way that made cold dread wash through her like ice water. "No," she whispered, voice trembling. "No, don't do this. Don't you do this." She leaned in close again, pressing her ear to his chest. Nothing. No weak rhythm. No flutter. No breath. Just silence. A terrible, suffocating silence that felt heavier than the warm summer air around her. Emily's shoulders shook. She squeezed her eyes shut, fighting tears. She couldn't let Liam see her break. She turned her head, checking the stroller. Liam's face was drenched in tears, but he wasn't screaming. He wasn't panicking. He just looked devastated, like he understood the weight of what was happening. He pressed both palms together and pushed them forward, reaching for the shepherd again. Emily nodded slowly, heart splintering. "Okay, buddy, I'll keep trying." She placed her hands on the dog's ribcage, preparing to attempt CPR. Just then, a sudden voice shouted behind her, startling her so violently she nearly dropped to the pavement. "Don't touch him." Emily spun around, her heart leaping into her throat. A tall man was sprinting toward her, eyes wild, panic written all over his face. The crowd, finally paying attention, turned to look. And Emily froze, breath catching once more. Because the man wasn't just anyone. He was the dog's owner. Emily froze, her hand still hovering over the German shepherd's trembling body as the tall man skidded to a stop a few feet away. His face was pale, sweat beading along his hairline, eyes wide with fear and desperation. "That's my dog," he shouted, voice cracking. Don't, he's mine." Emily's hands trembled, but she didn't pull away. She looked into his eyes and said firmly, "He's choking. He can't breathe. I'm trying to save him." The man faltered, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. His chest heaved, uncertainty and panic wrestling on his face. I don't know how." Liam let out a sharp cry from the stroller, reaching frantically toward the shepherd as if to say, "Don't stop. Don't let him go." Emily took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. The dog's body convulsed weakly beneath her, his legs twitching uncontrollably. Emily could feel his rapid heartbeat faltering under her hands. The panic in his eyes mirrored her own. She had to act. Every second mattered. She remembered the instructions from that old canine first aid workshop, the Heimlich maneuver for dogs, a last resort procedure, but she had never actually performed it. The thought of hurting him terrified her, but doing nothing meant certain death. She swallowed hard, fingers trembling, and positioned herself carefully behind the dog, pressing her arms just under his ribcage. The owner knelt awkwardly beside her, his hands hovering uselessly. Wait," he said, fear lacing his voice. "You'll hurt him." Emily snapped, urgency cracking her tone. "He's dying. Do you want him to die?" The man swallowed hard. He wanted to argue, to stop her, to control the situation, but fear tethered his voice. He could see the truth in her eyes. She knew what she was doing, or at least, she hoped she did. Okay, he muttered, stepping closer but careful not to interfere. Emily braced herself. She could feel the shepherd's ribs flex under her fingers as she took a deep breath and pulled upward sharply. Nothing. She tried again, firmer this time. The dog's body twitched, but the obstruction didn't budge. The panic building in her chest made her hands shake violently. Liam screamed from the stroller, tiny fists pounding the tray in frustration, eyes wide as if urging her not to give up. Emily tried a third time, the Heimlich thrusts coming faster now, her arms burning with strain. She glanced briefly at the dog's owner, whose face was taut with worry, jaw clenched, hands trembling. His dog was dying in front of him, and there was nothing he could do except watch and pray. Then finally, A faint, rasping cough escaped the dog's throat. Emily froze. Hope surged, sharp and sweet, before crashing again as the dog's chest slumped, his body limp once more. "Stay with me, buddy," Emily whispered. "Come on, you can do this." The man's hands hovered uncertainly. I can try maybe if he stammered, but Emily shook her head. "No, I've got this, just watch and call for help." Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder, but Emily barely registered them. Time had condensed into a single, desperate moment, every second stretching infinitely as she focused on the dog's body beneath her hands. She tilted the dog's head carefully to check his airway again. The ball was still lodged far back, smooth and round, impossible to reach with fingers alone. She could attempt to dislodge it manually, but the risk of pushing it deeper terrified her. She hesitated, breath quivering, heart hammering against her chest. Liam whimpered, tiny hands gripping the stroller tray. Emily glanced at him. His wide eyes, full of fear and determination, mirrored her own. Somehow he understood. Somehow this tiny human, barely able to walk or talk, had recognized the severity of the moment and was silently urging her not to fail. Emily's hands shook, but she forced herself to move. She reached in carefully, fingers brushing the rubber ball, feeling it press against the back of the dog's throat. She inhaled sharply. One wrong move and she could kill him instantly, but not moving meant he would die anyway. She hooked her fingers around the ball and pulled gently, gradually, feeling it shift. The dog's body jerked violently. Emily stumbled backward slightly, holding on hard in her throat. He coughed weakly, painfully, but he coughed, a rasping sound that was more life than death. The owner gasped, He's coughing." Emily didn't reply, she couldn't. Her focus was absolute. She adjusted her grip, pulling more firmly, hoping the obstruction hadn't moved further down. The dog twitched violently again, paws scratching the pavement. Emily could feel the tension in his muscles, the raw fear in his body. And then, miracle or stubborn instinct, he expelled the ball with a wet, rattling cough that made her gasp along with him. The ball bounced across the sidewalk, a small rubber projectile of life saved. The shepherd lay panting heavily, chest rising and falling in ragged, desperate gasps. Emily held her breath, listening for the steady rhythm of a returning heartbeat. It was there, weak, irregular, but there. Liam squealed in delight from the stroller, clapping his tiny hands. He leaned forward, still reaching for the dog, unable to comprehend what had just happened but celebrating anyway. The owner sank to his knees beside the dog, wrapping his arms around his trembling body. Oh my God, thank you," he whispered, voice cracking with tears. Emily's hands were slick with sweat and saliva. Her arms ached, muscles trembling, but she didn't move yet. She pressed gently against the shepherd's chest, checking his breathing, still shallow, still unstable. He needed more care, more time, more oxygen. But for the first time, hope had returned. Then came the sirens, police, fire, EMTs closing in fast. The crowd that had stood frozen moments before now pressed closer, murmuring, pointing, eyes wide with disbelief and awe. The owner looked around, panic replaced by relief but tempered with fear. "Is he going to be okay?" he asked, voice trembling. Emily shook her head. "I don't know, but he's alive. That's the first step." The shepherd's tail twitched weakly against the pavement, then thumped once, twice, small, deliberate, as if saying, "I'm still here." Emily looked at Liam, whose tiny fists were raised in a victorious little cheer. His eyes shone with joy and wonder. Somehow, in his own baby way, he had been part of saving this dog. Somehow, the smallest observer had been the catalyst for action that no adult had mustered on their own. But the moment of relief was short-lived. The shepherd's breathing remained shallow, uneven. His eyes flickered, opening and closing in exhaustion. One wrong movement could send him back to the brink. Emily and the owner tried to hold him steady while the EMTs arrived, sliding their equipment across the concrete, voices sharp with urgency. Move him carefully, keep him upright. Don't let him flop, keep that airway clear. Emily braced herself, hands still gently supporting the dog. Liam wriggled slightly in his stroller, fussing but watching intently, like a tiny guardian of life who had already witnessed the unimaginable. And then a sudden, unexpected twist. The shepherd flinched violently, yelping in pain. His hind legs twitched uncontrollably, and he thrashed against their hands, shaking violently. Emily's heart stopped. "Not again," the owner cried, panic flashing across his face. "No, no, no, don't stay still, stay still." The EMTs froze, assessing the situation, tension in their every move. Emily leaned closer, whispering urgently to the shepherd, her lips almost brushing his fur. "You made it this far, don't give up now, you can do this." But the dog's eyes rolled back slightly, and his body went limp for a terrifying instant. The world seemed to pause. And in that frozen moment, Emily realized something she hadn't before. Survival wasn't guaranteed. The dog's life hung by a fragile thread, a thread she had pulled taut with her own hands. One false move, 1 second too slow, and it could all be over. Yet Liam, sitting in his stroller, tiny fists balled, eyes wide with a mix of fear and fascination, stared at the shepherd like he already knew the outcome might hinge on this very moment. Emily's pulse roared in her ears. She swallowed, hands steadying despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. She refused to let fear paralyze her. Because she knew the next moment would define everything. The city street had transformed into a small theater of chaos. The golden sunset now pooled in puddles along the curb, reflecting the spiraling tension in the faces of those gathered. Cars slowed, pedestrians halted mid-step, and the faint wail of sirens in the distance hinted at urgency, but nothing compared to the panic brimming between Emily, the German shepherd, and his owner. The man knelt beside the dog, hands shaking as he hovered uncertainly. His voice broke, torn between fear, anger, and helplessness. "You can't just, he's my dog." Emily didn't back down. Her eyes burned with determination, breath coming fast. "He's choking. He's barely breathing. You're going to watch him die if we don't act, and that's worse than anything else." The man flinched at her words like a punch to the gut. I don't know what to do," he whispered, voice tight. I could hurt him." "Do it wrong or do nothing. He dies either way," Emily snapped, hands still pressed gently but firmly against the shepherd's ribs. "Right now I'm trying to save him. Are you going to help or just watch?" Behind her, Liam squealed, tiny fists pounding against the stroller tray. His wide eyes, glimmering with tears and terror, stayed locked on the dog. Somehow, Emily realized the baby's panic was strangely motivating, almost commanding her to act faster, harder, without hesitation. The man swallowed hard, swallowing down the fear that threatened to paralyze him. Slowly, he moved closer, hands hovering cautiously. I can hold his head. That's safe, right?" Emily nodded. "Yes, hold it steady. Don't move him, just keep his airway open." The shepherd's body twitched violently beneath their combined touch. Each movement was a battle. One wrong shift, and he could slip further into unconsciousness. Emily braced herself against the weight of the dog, muscles screaming in protest, heart hammering in her chest like a jackhammer. She repositioned her hands and tried the Heimlich maneuver again, thrusting sharply upward. A weak, rasping cough escaped the dog's throat. His legs trembled, claws scrabbling against the asphalt. Emily's arms shook violently, but she refused to relent. One more attempt, she told herself. One more. The owner's hands pressed against the shepherd's head, steadying him as best he could. "Oh God, come on," he whispered, voice barely audible. "Stay with me, buddy, stay." Emily leaned closer, teeth gritted. "You can do this. I'm not giving up. Not now, not ever." The dog's eyes flickered open, small pools of pain and terror. Emily felt a sharp pang of guilt. How had it come to this? The helplessness, the weight of life resting entirely in her hands, and yet she could do something. She had to. Suddenly, a voice shouted from the sidewalk. "Call 911 now." A young man had pulled out his phone, standing frozen but ready to assist. Emily waved him away with a quick shake of her head. There was no time for calls. Every second mattered. The shepherd twitched again, his body jolting violently. Emily's heart lurched. She readjusted her arms, pressing firmly under the ribcage, thrusting upward. The dog let out a faint cough, weak but alive. The owner exhaled shakily, relief washing over him in waves. I think he's moving." Emily didn't dare celebrate. She couldn't. The ball was still lodged in the dog's throat, and one wrong shift could push it further down. She pressed her hands harder, fingers shaking as she tried to reach it manually. And then it happened. The dog convulsed violently. A shudder ran through his body, head snapping back. Emily stumbled backward, barely holding him steady. His chest heaved raggedly, a wet, rasping sound escaping his throat. The rubber ball had shifted slightly, but was still trapped. Don't give up," Emily whispered through gritted teeth. Her arms burned with strain. She could feel sweat stinging her eyes. Behind her, Liam screamed, tiny voice rising in panic. Emily glanced at him, seeing his little arms flail as if trying to help. Somehow, his terror only fueled her resolve. The man cried out, panic breaking into tears. "Do something, please, I can't." Emily ignored him, focusing on the dog. She wrapped her fingers carefully around the ball, reaching as far as her small hands could. It was slippery, slick with saliva, lodged dangerously far back. One wrong tug could damage the shepherd's throat, but doing nothing guaranteed death. She pulled hard. The dog's body jerked violently again, limbs flailing. Emily's knees hit the pavement as she tried to anchor herself. The sound of claws scraping against concrete echoed sharply in the sudden hush of the street. Then a faint, wet cough. A tiny miracle. The ball shifted slightly, enough for Emily to reposition her fingers and pull again. This time, the object came free, bouncing across the asphalt like a small, rubber heartbeat that had escaped its cage. The shepherd collapsed onto his side, chest heaving heavily, tongue lolling. He was alive but not yet safe. The owner gasped, voice breaking. He's alive, thank you, oh my God." Tears streamed down his face as he wrapped his arms around the shepherd, holding him close, whispering frantic, incomprehensible words. Emily's arms shook violently, muscles burning from the strain. Liam squealed, clapping his tiny hands, a sound both joyful and terrified. Somehow, the baby had witnessed a near death, had urged her to act, and now celebrated survival with instinctive innocence. For a moment, a fragile silence fell over the street. People stopped, staring, mouths slightly open. Phones were out, cameras poised, but Emily barely noticed. Her focus remained on the dog's shallow, ragged breathing. He was alive, but he wasn't out of danger. Then, as if on cue, the shepherd's legs twitched violently again. His hind limbs kicked out spasmodically, knocking against Emily's knees. He let out a weak whine, eyes fluttering, almost rolling back. Emily froze, panic surging. One wrong move could undo everything. She pressed her hands gently against his chest, checking the shallow breaths, willing his body to stabilize. The man beside her shook, horrified. "Not again, don't move." Emily's mind raced. Emergency responders were close now, sirens louder, approaching fast. She could hear the officers and medics coordinating as they ran toward the scene. But right now, all that mattered was keeping the shepherd alive. She leaned closer, whispering encouragements like a prayer. "You can do this. You're strong, you're alive, you're going to stay with us." And then out of the corner of her eye, she noticed a shadow moving rapidly. Another pedestrian, drawn in by the chaos, had stopped and was crouching, reaching into a bag. Emily's heart raced. Could this person help, or would they only complicate things? The shepherd convulsed again, tiny spasms racking his body. Emily's hands dug in, bracing, fingers pressing firmly yet delicately. The ball had been removed, but his fragile body teetered on the edge of collapse. The sirens were almost at their location. EMTs would arrive any second. But Emily knew, with a sickening clarity, that survival would still depend on the next crucial moments. And then the worst happened. The shepherd let out a low, gurgling sound, chest collapsing slightly, eyes flickering closed. Emily's breath caught. This was it, another brush with death. He could slip away before anyone else arrived. Liam's small scream pierced her heart, tiny arms flailing, eyes wide with panic. Emily leaned in, holding her hands steady despite trembling, whispering fiercely, "Stay with me. You're not done, not yet. You fight, you fight." The street fell into a tense, frozen stillness. Every passerby, every onlooker seemed to hold their breath. Seconds stretched into eternity. And as the shepherd's body quivered, teetering on the edge between life and death, Emily realized the truth she had feared from the start. Survival wasn't guaranteed. Not yet. Not until the medics arrived. Not until the dog had fully regained strength. Not until the next heartbeat. And even then, the fight was far from over. The sirens were deafening now, red and blue lights flashing across the street, bouncing off store windows and glinting on the damp asphalt. Emily's chest heaved from exertion, arms shaking, muscles trembling from the strain of holding the German shepherd upright. The dog's body shuddered violently in her arms, legs flailing in spasms that made her knees scrape against the pavement. Every second felt like a lifetime. Every shallow breath he took was a battle against the invisible enemy lodged in his throat. "Stay with me, buddy," Emily hissed, pressing her hands firmly under his ribs. Sweat ran down her face, dripping into her eyes. Her arms were burning, muscles screaming, but she couldn't stop now. She had come too far. Beside her, the dog's owner knelt helplessly, hands hovering over his pet, unsure if he could touch him without causing harm. I can't. What if I hurt him?" His voice cracked, raw with panic. Emily snapped, voice sharp. "Doing nothing will hurt him. You either help or step aside. He's dying right now." The man swallowed hard. Fear battled with the desperate need to act. Slowly, he placed his trembling hands on the dog's head, trying to steady him. His palms were slick with sweat. Okay, steady," he muttered, almost to himself. Emily nodded, refusing to look away from the dog. Liam's tiny cries punctuated the chaos, the baby wriggling in his stroller, desperate to do something, anything. Emily glanced briefly at him. Those hazel eyes, wide with terror and determination, mirrored her own. Somehow, the child seemed to understand the gravity of the moment better than any adult on the street. The German shepherd trembled violently again. His body was thin with panic and suffocating fear. Emily repositioned her hands, preparing for the Heimlich maneuver one more time. She could feel the rubber ball just behind the throat, slick with saliva, lodged in the cruelest possible position. Her arms tensed, fingers dug in, pressing upward, muscles quivering. She pulled hard. A faint cough escaped the dog, but the ball didn't budge. Emily's breath caught. She felt the dog's body collapse slightly against her, limbs slackening. Panic shot through her veins like ice water. No, don't you dare leave me now," she thought, pressing harder. "Come on, stay with me, she whispered, teeth gritted. The dog's body twitched violently again. This time, a gurgling cough burst from his throat, a sound horrifyingly wet like air struggling through water. Emily's heart leapt. Could this be it? Could he finally push it out? The ball shifted slightly, just enough to give her hope. She leaned in, hooking her fingers around it carefully, adjusting her grip with the precision of someone defusing a bomb. And then disaster. The shepherd convulsed again, violently, knocking Emily backward slightly. Her hand slipped momentarily and the dog let out a weak yelp. Emily cursed under her breath. No. She pressed harder, anchoring herself against the pavement, refusing to let go. She could hear the approaching EMTs now, their voices sharp and urgent. "What's happening? Is he breathing? Keep him steady." Emily's hands were slick with sweat and saliva, her fingers trembling as she reached in again. She hooked the ball, gripping it tightly. She took a deep breath and pulled with all her strength. The dog convulsed one final time, jerking violently against her grip, and then, a miracle. The rubber ball shot free from his throat, bouncing across the pavement with a small, wet plop. Emily gasped, chest heaving. The German shepherd collapsed onto his side, panting heavily, tongue lolling. His chest rose and fell in ragged, uneven gasps, alive, just barely. The owner let out a strangled cry of relief, collapsing to his knees beside his pet. "Oh God, thank you, thank you, thank you." He wrapped his arms around the trembling body, whispering frantically into the dog's fur. "I thought I lost you, I thought I lost you forever." Liam squealed from his stroller, clapping his tiny hands in delighted chaos, babbling incomprehensible baby words. He kicked his feet, bouncing slightly, overwhelmed by joy and terror. Somehow, in his small, innocent way, he had played a role in this. Somehow, his urgency had compelled his mother to act faster, to push harder, to keep fighting. Emily's arms burned, muscles trembling, but she refused to let go. She kept her hands pressed against the dog's chest, checking his shallow breaths, willing his body to stabilize. "Keep him upright," she instructed the approaching EMTs, voice strained but firm. "Do not let him flop, check his airway, do everything you've got." The medics arrived in a flurry, sliding their stretcher across the asphalt, kneeling beside the shepherd. They assessed him rapidly, hands moving with professional precision. "He's alive but in critical condition," one said, voice clipped with urgency. "We need to stabilize him immediately. Airway, oxygen, and rapid transport." Emily and the owner worked together, gently holding the dog in place while the EMTs prepared equipment. Every twitch, every shallow breath was a reminder. He was not out of danger yet. Suddenly, the shepherd flinched violently, legs kicking out unpredictably. Emily grabbed him, anchoring him against her body, sweat and adrenaline mixing into a heady, desperate cocktail. She whispered fiercely into his fur, "You made it this far, don't give up now, you can do this." The EMTs checked vitals and placed oxygen over his snout. Emily felt the weight of the situation in her bones. The life of this animal, fragile and near death, balanced entirely on the actions of those few who had refused to turn away. Then, in a terrifying twist, the dog's breathing became shallow again. His eyelids drooped, chest barely moving. A hush fell over the assembled crowd. Even the sirens seemed distant now, swallowed by the intensity of the moment. Emily's heart stopped for a moment. She could feel the panic radiating from the owner. His hands shook violently as he held the shepherd's head, whispering, "Stay with me, please stay." The dog's tail twitched once, a small, deliberate movement. A flicker of life, but fragile, uncertain, like a candle fighting a strong wind. Emily refused to release him, hands pressing gently but firmly, willing him to keep fighting. She glanced at Liam, tiny fists balled, face streaked with tears, staring wide-eyed at the dog. Somehow, the baby had become an invisible force of hope. His presence seemed to demand survival. The EMTs stabilized the dog on the stretcher, working quickly. Emily and the owner hovered, steadying him as best they could, hearts pounding. Every twitch, every gasp of breath, every tiny shiver was critical. And then, just as they were about to lift him, the shepherd convulsed one last time. Limbs flailed, body jolting against their hands. A gurgling cough escaped, weak but persistent. Emily's stomach dropped. This wasn't over, not yet. The medics exchanged glances, nodding. "We're ready to move him now. Keep him steady." The owner held him close for a final moment, whispering desperate prayers. Emily kept her hands lightly on his chest, refusing to let go. Liam's squeal of encouragement pierced the tension, small but powerful. The stretcher lifted. The dog was alive but fragile, teetering on the brink of life and death. Emily's heart raced, sweat stinging her eyes. She realized the terrifying truth. Surviving the obstruction was only the first battle. The next would be the most dangerous, the unknown aftermath. And just as the EMTs prepared to rush him into the ambulance, the shepherd let out a wet, rattling gasp, and then his body went eerily still again. Emily's breath caught. The owner's eyes widened in horror. Liam's tiny hands reached forward instinctively, as if he could pull the dog back from the edge with sheer willpower. The world seemed to hold its breath. And in that moment, Emily realized the fight wasn't over. Not yet. Not even close. The ambulance door swung open with a shrill clang that seemed louder than reality, the flashing red lights reflecting off the damp pavement like warning beacons. Emily and the German shepherd's owner hovered on either side of the stretcher, hands trembling as the EMTs maneuvered the dog into the vehicle. Every shallow, rasping breath was a reminder that the shepherd's life was hanging by the thinnest of threads. Liam squealed from his stroller, tiny fists pumping the air in frantic encouragement. Emily glanced back at him, heart swelling with awe and fear. Somehow, the child had become more than a bystander. His instinctive urgency had driven her actions, had pushed her to keep fighting when exhaustion and fear threatened to paralyze her. The EMTs worked swiftly, oxygen masks pressed carefully over the dog's muzzle, monitoring equipment beeping rhythmically, but the readings were irregular, fragile. One shallow gasp, one skipped beat, and the balance could tip in an instant. "He's extremely compromised," one medic said, voice clipped, professional but tense. "If he goes into respiratory arrest, we'll need to intubate immediately." Emily swallowed hard, gripping the side of the stretcher as her chest heaved. He'll make it, right?" she asked, voice almost breaking. The medic didn't answer. There was no guarantee, not yet. The ambulance doors slammed shut and the vehicle lurched forward. Emily ran alongside for a moment, then stepped back as the medics secured the dog inside. The city blurred around her, streetlights, pedestrians, and sirens blending into a surreal haze. Her heart hammered, adrenaline coursing in overdrive. Beside her, the dog's owner sank to his knees, hands covering his face. "I thought I lost him," he whispered. I thought he was gone forever." Emily knelt beside him, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "He's not gone. Not yet. He's alive because we acted, because we didn't walk away like everyone else." The man shook his head, voice trembling. But it was so close, so damn close. Emily glanced toward Liam, still sitting in his stroller, wide-eyed and silent now. The baby's tiny chest heaved with nervous energy, his little fingers gripping the tray. Somehow, Emily realized the child had witnessed something extraordinary, a life clinging desperately to existence, and had been, in his innocent way, a catalyst for survival. The ambulance pulled away, sirens wailing, leaving Emily and the owner standing in stunned silence. The street returned to its ordinary rhythm. Cars passed, joggers resumed their pace, pedestrians whispered among themselves. But for the two humans and the baby, the ordinary world had been stripped away. What remained was the fragile, terrifying knowledge that a life had been saved barely. Emily's thoughts were a tangled storm of relief, fear, and lingering adrenaline. The Heimlich maneuver, the dog's flailing body, the rasping coughs, all of it played in her mind in a looping sequence, a brutal montage of the moments that had defined the last half hour. "I can't believe he's alive," the owner murmured again, voice choked. I owe you, I don't know how to thank you." Emily shook her head. "Don't thank me, you were here too. You held him steady, you kept him alive, we did it together." The man's eyes glistened with tears. I can't lose him again." Emily nodded, understanding. The shepherd wasn't just a pet. He was family, a loyal companion, a constant presence in the man's life. Losing him would have been devastating, unbearable, and the knowledge of how close they had come to that reality lingered like a shadow. Suddenly, a voice called out from behind them, "Excuse me, are you the one who saved him?" They turned to see a young woman holding a phone out recording. This was incredible. I mean, He was choking, and everyone walked by, and then, you, she gestured at Emily, eyes wide with admiration. You saved his life. Emily blinked, overwhelmed. It was nothing, really it was. No, it wasn't nothing, the woman interrupted. People need to see this. This is incredible. A baby, a dog, a mother, it's like something out of a movie. Liam squealed again, tiny fists pumping as if he understood that people were talking about the very moment he had witnessed. Emily smiled despite herself, heart softening at the baby's innocence amidst the chaos. The shepherd's owner shook his head, still kneeling on the curb. I don't care about the cameras, he said firmly. I just care that he's alive. That's all that matters. Emily nodded, but a nagging thought gnawed at her. The dog's condition was still fragile. Survival was only the first step. He would need oxygen, careful monitoring, possibly surgery. One misstep in the next few hours could undo all their efforts. The ambulance pulled into view again, this time ready to transport the shepherd to the veterinary emergency hospital. EMTs climbed out, preparing to load him in fully, the red and blue lights painting frantic streaks across the asphalt. Emily and the owner approached cautiously, giving the dog space while staying close. One of the medics lifted him carefully, placing him on a stretcher with precise movements. His chest rose and fell in shallow, uneven breaths, eyes fluttering weakly. Ready? One EMT asked. Go, Emily said, voice tight with emotion. The ambulance doors closed. The vehicle lurched forward, sirens screaming, lights flashing, disappearing down the street into the growing dusk. Emily sank onto the curb, chest heaving. Adrenaline began to ebb, leaving her exhausted, trembling, and overwhelmed by the gravity of what had just occurred. Beside her, the dog's owner rested his hands on the curb, head down, voice trembling. He's alive, but what if? Emily placed a hand gently on his shoulder. We don't know yet, but he has a chance. That's all we can hope for right now. He fought, you fought, and he's still here. They sat in silence, watching the fading red and blue lights of the ambulance disappear into the distance. Liam babbled quietly, curling into Emily's lap, his little body exhausted but safe. Somehow, Emily felt the weight of the moment settle onto her. And then the unthinkable happened. The stretcher inside the ambulance jolted violently, and a faint, gurgling sound escaped from the oxygen mask. Emily's stomach dropped. She had hoped this would be the moment when relief fully washed over her, but instead, panic surged again. The shepherd's fragile body was still teetering on the edge. The owner whispered a broken prayer under his breath. Emily's hands clenched into fists in her lap. Liam reached up, tiny fingers pressing against her chest, sensing her tension even if he didn't understand why. The ambulance rounded a corner, disappearing from view, but in Emily's mind, the moment stretched out infinitely. The dog was alive, but barely, and survival depended on the next critical hours in ways none of them could control. A cold realization settled over her like ice. Even after the battle on the street, the fight for life was far from over. Emily's heart pounded. She whispered under her breath, almost to herself, almost to the universe, "Please stay with us. Please don't leave him now." The street had returned to its ordinary rhythm, but the tension remained, suspended, fragile, terrifying. And in that suspended moment, everyone involved realized the truth. They had survived the immediate danger, but the story wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The emergency veterinary hospital smelled of antiseptic and urgency. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead as the stretcher carrying the German shepherd was wheeled swiftly down the narrow corridor. Emily ran alongside, heart hammering, adrenaline surging through every fiber of her body. Liam's small fingers gripped the edge of her hand, his wide eyes taking in the bright, sterile world with a mixture of fear and curiosity. The shepherd lay on the stretcher, oxygen mask secured over his muzzle, chest rising and falling in shallow, uneven breaths. His fur was damp with sweat and saliva, limbs twitching occasionally in weak spasms. Emily's stomach knotted at the sight. He was alive, yes, but barely. The slightest mishap now could undo everything. A veterinarian in scrubs intercepted them, her expression sharp and controlled. "Where's the obstruction?" she demanded. Emily swallowed, voice tight. "It was a rubber ball, he choked on it on the street. I removed it manually. He's alive, but he's in critical condition." The vet's eyes widened slightly. "You removed it manually. That's incredibly risky." Emily nodded, refusing to let guilt wash over her now. "I had to. He was suffocating. I didn't have time to wait." The vet glanced at the shepherd, then back at Emily and the dog's owner. "We need to get him stabilized immediately. He's at risk of cardiac arrest and respiratory failure. We'll start IV fluids, oxygen therapy, and monitor his vitals closely. Any irregularity could be fatal." Emily's stomach tightened. She could feel Liam squirming against her legs, tiny fists clenching the edge of her sweater. Somehow, he seemed to sense the fragility of the situation, the dangerous edge between life and death. The stretcher was wheeled into a bright treatment room, machines beeping rhythmically, monitors flashing in red and green. Emily and the owner followed closely, anxiety coiling tight in their chests. "Stay here," the vet instructed firmly. "We need to work quickly." Emily nodded, gripping the side of the stretcher, unwilling to let go of the dog. She had fought for him once. She couldn't imagine letting him slip away now. The dog's chest heaved violently as the oxygen mask delivered its fragile flow. His pupils fluttered, eyelids twitching, tiny spasms racing through his body. Emily whispered softly, voice trembling, "You've come so far, buddy, just hold on a little longer, just a little longer." The owner crouched beside her, placing a trembling hand over the dog's head. "I thought I lost you. I can't go through that again." Tears streaked his cheeks as he pressed his forehead gently against the shepherd's muzzle. The vet's team moved quickly, attaching IV lines, checking vitals, and monitoring oxygen levels. Beeps from the machines echoed sharply in the tense room. Emily could feel every shallow breath the dog took, every slight twitch, as if his life were measured directly against her heartbeat. "His oxygen saturation is low," one technician said, voice clipped. "We need to intubate if it drops further." Emily's stomach twisted. Intubation meant sedation, manipulation, and risk. She swallowed hard, gripping the side of the stretcher. "Do whatever you need to do," she whispered, voice hoarse. "Just keep him alive." The shepherd let out a weak, wet whine, legs trembling. Emily's hands instinctively pressed lightly against his chest, willing him to keep breathing. Every second stretched into an eternity. Every shallow gasp was a fragile victory. Suddenly, a violent spasm ran through the dog's body. He yelped, thrashing slightly against the restraints. Emily's hands shot to stabilize him, heart hammering. "Stay with us. You can do this." The vet barked instructions to her team. "We need to sedate him carefully. Prepare the intubation kit." Emily's stomach sank. The thought of sedation made her nervous. She had already fought tooth and nail to save him on the street. Now his fragile body might not survive the procedure, but she had no choice. The vet's orders were clear. Survival depended on swift, precise action. The owner's hands shook violently as he reached out, almost instinctively wanting to stop the procedure. "No, no, don't." Emily gripped his arm firmly. "It's the only way to stabilize him. Trust them." He hesitated, eyes wide with fear, then reluctantly nodded. The vet administered a careful sedative, the shepherd's body relaxing slightly, though his chest remained shallow. Emily's hands hovered over him, ready to intervene if necessary. Liam squealed softly, tiny fists pressing against Emily's arm. Somehow, even in sedation, the baby seemed aware of the danger. As the team prepared to intubate, the dog twitched violently, his eyes fluttering open briefly. Emily leaned close, whispering, "You've come so far, just a little longer, just hold on." The team worked with professional precision, guiding the breathing tube carefully into the dog's throat. Emily held her breath, every second stretching into unbearable tension. The shepherd's tiny yelps echoed weakly in the room. Finally, the tube was in place. Oxygen flowed steadily. Monitors beeped in regular rhythm. For a brief moment, relief flooded Emily's chest, but it was tempered by the knowledge that he was still critically unstable. "He's stabilized for now," the vet said, voice clipped. "But we need to monitor him for at least 24 hours. Any infection, stress, or irregularity could send him into cardiac or respiratory failure." Emily exhaled shakily, tears welling in her eyes. She lowered herself to the floor beside Liam, who babbled quietly, exhausted but safe. Somehow, in his small, innocent way, he had been part of this miraculous rescue. The owner sank to his knees, holding the dog gently, whispering soft words of comfort. "You're going to be okay. You're going to be okay." Emily's gaze shifted to the monitors. Every beep, every flash was a reminder that survival wasn't guaranteed. She had fought to save him on the street, but now the real test was beginning. Survival depended on care, precision, and the fragile resilience of the dog's own body. Then unexpectedly, the shepherd's chest shuddered violently. The oxygen mask hissed slightly as he wheezed. The room froze for a heartbeat. The vet's eyes widened. "He's showing signs of distress again." Emily felt her stomach drop. The fragile thread of life she had held in her hands on the street was being tested again. Liam let out a startled cry, tiny fingers pressing against Emily's arm. Emily's heart ached at the sound. The baby had already witnessed more fear and desperation than most adults ever would, but he seemed to sense the urgency, the precariousness of the moment. The vet barked instructions. "Increase oxygen flow, prepare emergency ventilation. We cannot lose him now." Emily's hands hovered over the dog's chest instinctively. She whispered fiercely, voice trembling, "Hold on, stay with us, please don't leave now." The monitors beeped rapidly. The shepherd let out a wet, desperate whine. The room felt impossibly small, the air heavy with fear and urgency. And then, a moment of terrifying stillness. The dog's body froze, legs stiffening. His eyes fluttered weakly, then rolled slightly. Every person in the room held their breath. Emily's heart stopped. She pressed her hands lightly against his chest, willing him to fight. The owner shook, whispering prayers, tears streaming down his face. Liam squealed softly, tiny fists raised, as if urging life to return. The vet's team moved with urgency, hands flying over the dog's body. Come on, don't let him go." Emily's vision blurred with tears, adrenaline, and exhaustion. Somehow, survival had become a fight beyond the street, a fight inside the sterile, fluorescent-lit room, against forces she couldn't control, with stakes higher than she had ever imagined. And as the shepherd's shallow chest rose and fell, barely, the tension in the room became unbearable. Everyone understood, without speaking, that the line between life and death was razor-thin. One mistake, 1 second too slow, and it could all be over. Emily whispered, almost inaudibly, as she pressed her hand against the trembling animal. "Hold on, please, just hold on." The monitors beeped irregularly, his breath shallow but still coming. The vet barked instructions, hands moving fast. Emily's stomach churned with anxiety. This was far from over. And then a sudden alarming beep from the monitor, a flat line. Emily's breath caught in her throat. The room froze. Every heartbeat, every breath, every second stretched impossibly long. The shepherd was still alive, or was he? The stakes had never been higher. Time seemed to stretch and collapse all at once inside the emergency veterinary room. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as monitors beeped in chaotic, jagged patterns. Emily's chest heaved with exhaustion and terror. Every shallow breath from the German shepherd was a fragile victory. His body trembled violently, legs flailing weakly, as if each twitch were a negotiation with life itself. The vet barked instructions to her team, moving with methodical urgency. Increase oxygen flow, prepare emergency ventilation, monitor cardiac activity. He's still unstable. Emily knelt beside the stretcher, hand lightly pressed against the dog's chest. "Come on, stay with us. Please, please don't leave now," she whispered, voice trembling. She felt Liam's tiny hand press against her arm again, almost like a reassurance that life must cling a little longer. Somehow, the baby's instinctive presence had become an invisible thread anchoring the dog to the world. The owner's tears streaked his cheeks, eyes wide with horror and hope in equal measure. He pressed his forehead gently to the dog's muzzle, murmuring prayers, names, and promises. "You're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. Just hold on. Don't leave me now." Emily swallowed the lump in her throat. She had fought tooth and nail to save this dog on the street, but now the real struggle was far from over. Every beep, every weak gasp, every flicker of movement was a reminder of how precarious life could be. Suddenly, the monitor emitted a rapid series of alarms. "Flatline." Emily froze, heart hammering. The vet barked orders. "Emergency, we may lose him. Begin CPR and ventilation immediately." Emily's hands instinctively pressed against the dog's chest, her fingers trembling violently. She followed the vet's instructions as best as she could, pumping rhythmically, hopping against hope that the fragile body beneath her hands would respond. Liam let out a squeal, tiny fists clenching, eyes wide with alarm. Emily glanced at him, and something in his expression, pure innocence mixed with raw intuition, made her resolve even stronger. Somehow this baby, barely able to speak or walk, had been a force of life in the chaos. His presence had sparked the courage to act on the street. Now he inspired endurance inside this room of emergency. The dog twitched, a faint yelp escaping, and Emily's chest tightened. Could he pull through? Could this fragile, trembling life hold on? Minutes passed in an eternity of tension. Emily pumped the dog's chest in rhythm with the vet's instructions, breath fogging in the sterile air. Every bead of sweat, every shaking muscle, every fearful glance from the owner intensified the cinematic weight of the moment. And then a faint gasp. The room held its collective breath as the dog's chest rose slightly, then again. Oxygen mask hissed, monitors beeped irregularly, but life had returned, fragile, weak, but undeniable. The vet exhaled sharply. "He's still alive. We've stabilized him for now." Emily collapsed against the stretcher, muscles trembling, tears streaming freely. She pressed her forehead against the dog's damp fur, whispering, "You made it. You stayed with us. You're going to be okay." The owner collapsed beside her, hands shaking as he hugged his beloved companion. "I thought I lost you. I thought I really lost you," he whispered, voice breaking. Liam, exhausted but still wide-eyed, reached toward the dog, squealing softly. Emily lifted him gently, allowing his tiny fingers to brush against the dog's fur. The baby's innocence, courage, and unspoken urgency had been an invisible lifeline throughout the ordeal. Somehow, his pure presence had made the impossible seem achievable. The vet adjusted equipment, checking vitals with precision. "We've managed to stabilize him temporarily. He'll need observation for at least 24 hours. We may need to perform minor procedures if there's internal trauma from the choking incident, but he's out of immediate danger." Emily nodded, relief washing over her in waves so intense it almost knocked her breath away. She sank fully onto the floor beside Liam, allowing herself a moment of quiet. The chaos outside the emergency room seemed distant, irrelevant. All that mattered was that the German Shepherd had survived, not just by chance, but by courage, action, and an extraordinary chain of human instinct and care. The owner stroked his dog gently, whispering apologies, promises, and declarations of love. "I'll never leave you alone, never again. You're my family, and I almost lost you." Emily glanced at Liam, his tiny eyes still wide but shining with pride and wonder. Somehow, the baby had been central to this story, a quiet observer whose mere presence had altered the course of events. She smiled through tears, realizing that heroism could come in the smallest packages, in ways the world rarely acknowledged. The vet turned to Emily and the owner. You both played a crucial role. The initial removal of the obstruction on the street bought him the time we needed. Without it, we may not have been able to stabilize him. The owner's voice broke. I don't even know how to thank you. How can I ever repay you? Emily shook her head, exhausted. You don't have to, just take care of him. Love him, that's all that matters. Liam squealed again, tiny fists punching the air in celebration. Emily lifted him, letting him bounce gently in her arms. Somehow, the baby's pure, instinctive joy seemed to heal the tension in the room, a reminder of the miraculous thread that had connected them all. Hours later, after the dog had been moved to an observation room with constant monitoring, Emily and the owner sat quietly, shoulders slumped in exhaustion but hearts full of relief. Liam lay asleep in Emily's lap, soft breathing, a stark contrast to the chaos of earlier. The owner turned to Emily, voice soft. I'll never forget this, not you, not the baby, not this day. He's alive because of all of us, but especially because of you. Emily smiled faintly, glancing down at Liam. Don't forget the baby. Somehow, he was the reason we didn't give up. The man nodded, understanding the truth. The smallest observer had been the spark of action, the catalyst of courage, and the silent guardian of life. And outside the window, the city moved on, unaware of the drama that had unfolded just hours before. But inside that quiet room, hearts had been tested, courage had been forged, and life had been saved against seemingly impossible odds. The German shepherd stirred gently in his observation bed, tail flicking weakly, eyes fluttering open. The room exhaled with relief, tears flowing freely, hearts finally allowing themselves to relax. Emily leaned back, exhausted but profoundly moved. Somehow she realized that the events of the day had left an indelible mark on everyone present. Fear, courage, desperation, hope, and love had collided in a single, intense moment of life-saving heroism. And as she looked down at Liam, sleeping softly against her chest, she whispered, You changed the world today in the smallest, most extraordinary way. Outside, the city lights shimmered against the dusk. Inside, life had been preserved, courage celebrated, and the fragile thread connecting humans, animals, and even the smallest observers had proven unbreakable. For one German shepherd, one mother, one baby, and one desperate stranger, the impossible had been overcome. And somehow, that miraculous day would be remembered not for the danger, but for the extraordinary acts of instinct, courage, and love that had held life in its fragile hands and refused to let go. The end.